Welcome to the Blueprints Podcast. I'm Isabelle Broidegam, Director of Marketing at Custom Built Designer Modeling, joined by Michael Flory, Founder, CEO of Custom Built, and also my dad. So excited to be here with you today. And today we're going to dive into talking about finding the right people for your business.
Well, I'm always excited to be here. And the part that's most exciting is the dad part.
Yeah.
So this is always fun to do this together and be building a business together and with our team. This is a real gift.
Yeah, it's really special. Well, one phrase that we use here often, and you've said over the years, is right people, right seat. And that comes from an EOS background, which entrepreneur operating system. But I want you to take us back to the early days of Custom Built when you were first starting and you were in many different seats. And I want to talk through how you built key leaders along the way to where we're at today, where there's over 40 full-time employees here at Custom Built.
Yeah. And it wasn't even back to the very beginning that I was in a lot of seats.
You're currently still in a lot of seats.
Not like I was, but
yeah.
But it is as you grow, you sometimes have to take on new seats along the way. So there wasn't those seats that are available. So yeah, RPRS. So we when we evaluate for, like, if I were to say, like, where do you start with this, right? What do I need? You know, when you first start a business, you're just getting going. You know, you need to generate leads. You got to generate sales. So you need marketing, sales. You need somebody to get the work done. So you got to have a production or operations department, and then somebody to manage all the cash and everything. So you got all those key seats, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to go into business, you're probably sitting in all those seats.
Yep.
Because you can't afford to hire somebody unless you went out and you're raising funds and you're starting a startup where you're bringing in funds. But I'm talking more like real small business and kind of starting from scratch the way we did it.
What do you call it? Bootstrapping?
Yeah, bootstrapping, working a lot of extra hours. But so the challenging thing with this is you need to step back from your business occasionally. And I think that's the hardest thing for an entrepreneur is day to day. This is what we do. We've poured our lives into it. It's providing for our family, and it's hard to get out of the business because when you leave the business, so does your revenue, you know? So some people, they're doing all the work on top of running it as well. And that's how I was when I first started it. You know, if I didn't show up to the job site on Monday morning, you know, we didn't create any money that week. You know, there was no work that got delivered, but I also had to go out and do all the estimates. So I was doing that at night. And then I had to do the designs as well. So I was in at 4 a.m. working on the CAD software. And these were all things that I had to teach myself because I didn't necessarily know how to do all those things. So sometimes as an owner, you're not often the best person to look at your structure and say, what do I need? Because you're like, well, I just need somebody like me. Why can't I just hire myself? That just doesn't work in business. You know, as you want to grow your business, you have to find somebody different than you, somebody that actually gets finance and thinks like a finance person, not like an owner. And so very often that can be hard. But if I were to start over, I would take a blank piece of, big sticky note. I would go sit in a beautiful place like this by myself, and I would just build out what I call an accountability chart. And great book to read is Traction. If you haven't read that book yet, it's a book written by Gino Wickman. He is is an amazing entrepreneur, but he created a system for small businesses to be able to kind of put together a structure. So there's a great book called Good to Great, and they always talked about the right person in the right seat, and they always use the bus as the example, right person, right seat. That's really where RPRS comes from. But Gino Wickman kind of puts it together in his whole system, the EOS system that has all the parts and pieces of it. But the accountability chart, so thinking about your different seats, so your sales seat, what does the person that's sitting in that sales seat, what are the top 3 to 5 things that they need to do for that to be successful? And you kind of land those things. They need to go out and prospect. They need to be able to, talk to homeowners. They need to understand the product that they're selling. So they got to have a lot of knowledge, right, to be able to sell that item. So those might be the top 3 to 5 things that you might require out of that role. So each of your roles, you kind of figure out, first of all, what roles do you need, and then what those are. And then you might have an accountability. If you're at 500,000 today, you might have an accountability chart today, but you might have a $2 million accountability chart. So as you start scaling, you're going to have more boxes, and you might have a different department. You might have a different structure as you get to 2 million. But what do you need today? And then you go out and you look for those people. Um, and it's always a journey to figure out, you know, did, and a lot of times you bring people in, but if you didn't have an SOP and they didn't understand the job, and
Mhm.
you just like a lot of my early hires, it was like, all right, day one training, I'm going out with you. And then day two, it's like you're on your own, go do it, like,
Yeah.
and then it's like, 6 months in, I'm frustrated because they're not doing the job consistently. And it's like, well, we didn't have an SOP for that. So there was no standard operating system. People forget. And, I've already been in the business doing it for 5 years. I know everything, the
Right, and
people you're hiring aren't going to know everything.
you've built it and you have your tone and your expertise and all of that. I think of with our sales team, the first salesperson you hired on, well, not the first, but the first one who's still here today, 2019, their onboarding looked so different than the salesperson that we hired on a year ago or even
Right.
this year, right? And
Right.
we joke about that as a sales team. It's like that person you're like, get in the truck, let's go, take it all in. Here's your deal, you got
Yeah,
it, go
by
run
day
with
3,
it.
I told him, I said, "I don't know if I hired the right person," because he kept asking me questions. He had a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, every human being is different in how we process information. A lot of people need a lot of information before they make a decision. Some people like me, they need very little information, and they're willing to take a risk and kind of learn and fail and along the way. So that doesn't really matter so much, role alignment. It's like, the second thing I like to talk about is, do they get it, want it, and have the capacity? So as we evaluate people, we look at our core values. So we have our 5 core values. Are they family focused? Are they, proactively helpful? Are they passionately committed type people? Do they fit
Mhm.
our company profile, of core value, uh, through and through? That doesn't mean they're all like me, but it means they have similar desires. They want to grow. They're not just happy with status quo, right? They want to really grow and become something more in their life,
Yeah.
And so we're looking for that. But that's hard to find in an interview process. But after they've been working for you for a while, you're looking at that. So you got those 5 core values, and you're evaluating them based on that. And then the second thing that we ask, we call this the people analyzer, is, do they get it, want it, and have the capacity to do the job? So get it is like, do they get the job? Like, do they generally understand when they come in on Monday morning that, like, as a salesperson, you have to have your own plan. Nobody's telling you what to do. Like there's not a set out, this isn't a factory, right?
Right,
Like,
there's a framework, but it's not like, "Hey, here's what 8 to 9 AM looks like 9 to
right.
10,"
Yeah,
like,
they got to be self-motivated, self-directed, and be
mhm.
focused. Like, because in that particular role, you have a lot of freedom, a lot of autonomy, a lot of, to do this and that and the other thing, but you got to get the main parts of your job done. So do they get the job? Do they understand what it takes? Do they want it? Do they really want the job? We've hired people, and they came to us and they thought they wanted the job, but they didn't really want the job. They really wanted to do something else oftentimes, and we're all guilty, right? Like, we don't always know what we want. So when we hire people, sometimes they're in flux, they're in transition, and they think this is what they want, but they don't end up wanting it. So you got to be able to identify that early and often. And then the last thing is, do they have the capacity? The capacity is like the knowledge. The capacity is the ability. Like, for instance, if it's an in-person job, do they have the capacity? Capacity would be they can't get to the office. Well, then, they don't have the capacity necessarily. But more think about capacity, is that, do they have the abilities, and can they be coached to do it?
Yep.
Now, if you hire somebody that doesn't fully have the capacities, just know that it's going to be a longer ramp up time. It's going to take longer to them to get to where, you want them to be, versus hiring somebody with the capacity. On the flip side of it, if you're hiring somebody that doesn't have all that capacity, sometimes once you get them there, they'll go beyond who the person that you might hire with all the
Yes.
capacity, because maybe they came from somewhere else where they're really in a comfort zone, and now you're trying to get them out of that comfort zone. That can be difficult to do as well. So we look at those 5 core values. We look at those. We kind of, give them a, plus minus minus evaluation.
Mhm.
That's how we do our evaluations. And then, so on core values, and then, do they get it, want it, and have the capacity? And that's how we kind of look at people. So accountability chart, and then core values, and then remarkable principles as well.
Mhm.
And then, looking at the, get it, want it capacity.